How's it going, humans? Today, we're making a pagoda out of some beautiful African walnut. A lot of it. So, it's gonna be epic. Where's the hole? Ah! I can't find the hole. Terrifying. I might cry. Now this is a pretty cool story. So a little while ago, one of my friends was over in Japan with his family, and everywhere they went, they saw these stone pagodas, and they absolutely fell in love with them. To the point where he was actually sending me messages while they were still on vacation, asking if I could make them a wooden pagoda for the front entranceway of their house. Now I didn't know what a pagoda was. All I knew is it was gonna be big, and it was gonna have a lot of curvy shapes. And this was something that kind of scared me. But what did I tell him when he asked me? Yes, absolutely I can make this. This sounds awesome. This is great. But did I have any idea how I was gonna do it? Nope, not a clue. Not a clue. So the first thing that I had to do was figure out what a pagoda actually was. And since they were in Japan, I looked up the meaning for a Japanese pagoda, which dates back to the 17th century. It symbolizes not only friendship, but also a traditional Japanese ideology. So from top to bottom, there's a symbolic representation of the sky, wind, fire, water, and earth. So now that I knew what a pagoda was, I had to figure out how to make one. So based on the photos that he sent me, I made a nice 3D design for how I thought this pagoda should look. So with that figured out, I was able to determine how much wood I needed, and I found this beautiful Mansonia walnut. So it's a African walnut, and it is so pretty. I fell in love with it immediately, and I made up a little sample piece for my buddy to look at, and he absolutely loved the way that it looked. So that's what we went with. Mansonia walnut. Now, I'm not kidding when I say that I needed a lot of wood for this project. Overall, the pagoda is about 3 feet tall, 16 inches wide at the widest spot, so I needed to buy about 40 board feet of 8/4 stock to make this thing come to life. So a pretty big investment just in the raw wood. So now that you know the why behind this project, it's time to get into the actual how I was able to do it, because between you and me, I'm still kind of surprised I was able to pull this one off. So at this point, I had 4 big glue ups done, and these pieces were going to turn into the 4 sides of the bottom tier of the pagoda. So after running a quick flattening pass on my CNC, I cut off about the bottom 5 to 6 inches because I needed the bottom to be a whole lot thicker in order to accommodate for this nice big curve. So with the first side all glued up, I only had 3 more pieces to flatten and prep, but I'm not going to show you that because that's boring. You've already seen that. But what you haven't seen is how I was actually going to cut this out on the CNC. So this was a pretty interesting process since I needed to cut all 4 sides to be perfectly the same, like identical, in fact. So the easiest way that I found to do that was to score a reference line on the bed of my CNC with a 60-degree V-carve bit. And I actually used my biscuit joiner to cut in these nice little slots to secure down the workpiece and just make sure that my hold down stayed out of the way of my bit. So I'm starting off with a 1/4 inch spiral upcut bit. I think that's what I used to rough out the rough shape of this tier. And with the machine set and everything ready to go, it was time to sit back and let it do its thing. with that piece all carved out, I could load up the next side and let it carve for the next 2 hours. That's right. It took 2 hours per side to carve out. Just this one tier, and I still have 2 more curvy, awkward shaped tiers to go. So since I was staring down the barrel of another 6 hours of CNC time to carve out the first tier, I used my time well by prepping all of the pieces for the second tier and I guess technically the 4th tier of this pagoda. Now, all in all, this part of the process was pretty simple. It's just a lot of glue ups and a lot of cutting and a lot of milling and making a lot of the exact same size pieces. It is a new day! The last few days have been a lot of repetition, a whole bunch of carving. So today, it's time to take on the second tier, which is gonna be all of these guys. So we got to flatten them, cut them. We're gonna cut, CNC, and do all like the carving things. So that is the plan for today. To hopefully get all 4 of those done. So let's make it happen. So with one side of the second tier done, it was just a whole lot of copy and paste to get the other 3 done. And then I had 2 tiers sitting there. Whoa! So at this point in the process, before I did any more carving on the CNC, I wanted to assemble the first few tiers, which meant I needed to cut a lot of 45-degree angles. So in order to do this, I made a quick crosscut sled and ran into a little bit of a problem because my blade height wasn't gonna go all the way up and fully cut through the bottom tiers. But that seemed like a future Hue problem to solve, and even though that was gonna be me in about 30 seconds, we still went ahead. So this is what we got. Got so close. So close. This one, I mean, not close at all, but I have an idea for that. Now, I didn't say it was going to be a good idea, but after trying a couple of different hand saws, including my great-grandfather's like 110-year-old hand saw, I just set my miter saw to 45 degrees and cut off the rest of the chunk. And I did leave it a little bit proud so that I could, trim it up all nice and flush after, which actually turned into being a bigger problem than I thought. And after a little trial and error, I ended up using some really long threaded rod and kind of just clamped the side of the pagoda back onto the miter sled, which got me a lot closer to removing all of the material, but I still had to do a little work by hand. So at the end of the day, these 45s didn't come out exactly perfect, but I was actually really impressed with how tight they were. Not horrible. Not horrible. I needed to do a little bit of cleanup and a little bit of, glue and sawdust trick. But all things considered, I'm extremely happy with how this glue up came together. And now I have a base to work off of. So the second tier went together pretty similar to the first tier. There's just a lot of cutting things at 45 degrees and my blade not being long enough and needing to flip some stuff around and finish off those 45-degree cuts so I could actually make like a nice square second tier. And let me just say, the glue ups on this thing have been the most terrifying glue ups that I have probably ever done. Like, it's one thing to mess up on a flat panel glue up that you can just kind of fix and put back together. But when you're gluing something up that's taken anywhere from 2 to 8 hours to carve on the CNC, let alone all the prep time you had to put into it before, it's stressful. It's really, really stressful. Terrifying. I think we're good. And just like the first tier, I am super happy with how this tier turned out. So it was about time to start, you know, making some mistakes, I think. I think now is when we should start making mistakes. What do you think? So the first mistake I made in this piece, and I say first because it's not gonna be the last, which shouldn't be much of a surprise to you guys if you've been watching my content for a while. You know, mistakes were made, right? So the first mistake here was making this little insert piece to fill the whole void thing at the bottom of the pagoda. And the mistake wasn't making this piece. This is a great piece that I was able to like put my logo in, all nice and proud, but very, very hidden from view, which I think is a really good thing that everybody should do on their art, is market with their name, their brand, their signature, their something. And usually having it out of view is kind of the nicest way to do it, especially when it's a piece for a client. All right. So like I said, the mistake wasn't making this piece. The mistake is what I'm doing right now and gluing it in place. And I'll let you try and figure out why this was a mistake, or at least a mistake to do it at this time and not much, much later. So we'll come back to that. Because right now, we have to make a cube, or like a tesseract. It's a box. Gotta make a box. So I'm not gonna lie, and as many of you already know, I am not a fine woodworker. Like, I can make some pretty cool stuff, and I can design some really intricate pieces, but math is hard, and I just realized that, like, I need 2 of these and 2 of these. Yeah, so, gonna make a couple more. Math is hard, guys. Stay in school. Or don't. But I am not the, like, hand-cut dovetail, perfect miters, like, made with a hand plane kind of person. I make it work, and I make it look good, but definitely nowhere near what you would call a fine woodworker. So getting to make this box, this cube, this little tesseract thing was a lot of fun for me because it really made me feel like I was a fine woodworker. I mean, not quite as fine as most of you, sure, but I was having to make multiple miters and perfect 45s over and over and over and over again on this, and it was really boosting my confidence. I felt like nothing could go wrong, and like nothing had gone wrong also, because I didn't know what I'd already messed up. I was still gonna find that out later. And I also didn't know what was still to come in this journey. But none of that mattered right now because I was making a box, or a cube, or a tesseract looking thing. And I was having a lot of fun doing it. And I have to say, I think it turned out pretty good. It's a really pretty box. So it was at this point in the process that I thought I would make my next big mistake. I might cry. And this one was a doozy. So with my first, second, and now third tier complete, the next piece to work on is this 4th tier hat. I'm calling it the hat because, I mean, it kind of looks like a hat, right? Right? So this piece started off at about 17.5 inches square by 4 inches thick. So that's about 8.5 board feet worth of material, which is a lot. And not only is it a lot of material, it was going to be a really long carve on the CNC. It was actually going to take about 5.5 hours to carve out this nice, curvy, flowy hat-like shape. So with everything set, prepped, ready to go, I started roughing out the shape, and I thought things were going great. They're going fantastic. They're going really, really well. And then we started to do the final smoothing pass with the ball nose bit. And that's when disaster struck. So did you see it? I'll slow it down for you because it happened pretty quick. I might cry. My bit dug. It just, yep. Yep. Oh, there it is. Oh, man, that's hot. Ow, oh, fuck. It is really hot. Ow, fuck. Ooh. Okay, that bit, very hot. So, it was coming along. Oh, I can feel that it actually went down there. Son of a bitch. And because the cutting shank is not big enough, it started grinding, and I was just really hoping that it was going to get to here and it was going to jump up and start passing up and over. And it didn't. And then it released from the collet and just dug in. So that sucks. Doesn't even begin to explain it. That really fucking sucks. Okay. Let's fix it. It's the only option. I'm gonna fix it. So yeah, the reason that happened was the cutting edge on this bit wasn't deep enough to encompass the entire drop and still be able to cut the wood where you see that little burn mark at the top. So I redesigned the file to cut a perimeter around this top square, and you can see how far in that bit still would have needed to go in order to do this on the finish pass alone. So with my little quick fix put in, I was able to get this carve back on track, and the rest of it turned out pretty good. Well, there it is, complete with fuck up. So, gonna fix that. We can fix that. It's not gonna be an issue. Otherwise, she came out pretty good. Not too bad. So after a quick little cleanup, it was time to figure out how I was going to actually now plug this hole. And I ended up doing that actually with the CNC also. So I made a quick little file and I cut out some plugs. Then I was able to cut out a perfectly round hole with the CNC to fit the plug inside. I figured with all of the curves and the angles and all that, this was just gonna be a easier way to get a nice tight fit. And it worked. Let that bad boy dry up. It was okay. So this has been quite a day. I didn't have lunch. It's like 7-ish o'clock now. I'm a little hungry. I was thinking about putting the other bit back in and recentering this and running just like this, the sweeping pass, just to take this down. But I'm not gonna do that. I'm just gonna sand it, we're gonna fix it, and we're just gonna make it flush later, because I don't wanna risk it. Had enough bad things happen today. So I'm gonna go eat a steak, because I deserve it. Okay, so it's been a few days, like 5 days. I can't do it. This hot with that is just not good enough, and I just can't do it. So we're gonna fix it. I have a brand new block, glued up, ready to go, ready to carve. So I'm gonna spend the next 5 hours carving this. And while this is carving, I'm gonna finally start figuring out how to actually put the pieces together. So that's right. As you can see in the background, my CNC is running and we are carving out our new hat. And this hat is going to be, it's going to be a good hat. It's going to be one hat to rule them all. Now, in order to get the pagoda connected together, I wanted to make sure that all of my surfaces were completely flat and flush. So in order to do that, I ended up taking some sandpaper and just adhering it to a piece of MDF. And I used it as a big sanding plane sled, a big flat thing that I could just rub it around and make everything all flat and smooth and flush. And it worked out really, really well. So with the fitment set the next thing that I needed to do was actually figure out how I wanted to connect these tiers together. And I didn't want to just glue it. See, there's so many different pieces and grain directions running in opposite ways that I wanted everything to be able to move around with the seasons, if it was even gonna do that. So the best way that I figured to do this was to go with dowel pins to start. I figured that this would be a great way to index the two pieces together, and if they ever needed to come apart and be put back together, foreshadowing, that I would know exactly the orientation so that everything would always look good and perfect and be lined up exactly the way it should. So with my dowel pins in and the first and second tier all lined up, I decided to take a similar approach in connecting the cube to the second tier, except I wanted this a little more solid, which meant I was going to bolt it together. Now, in order to do this, I needed to add a few more little pieces inside of the second tier, but that was easy enough to take care of. So with some threaded inserts put in, I was able to get the two tiers bolted together. And then I thought maybe I should do this for the first and second tiers also. But there was a problem, because I needed to reach my hand in through the bottom of the pagoda in order to tighten up all the bolts. But I couldn't do that because some fool glued in a bottom plate. So I had to cut this piece out, and I'm gonna need to figure out a removable plate to put back in here a little bit later. So with a few more pieces of wood added to my second tier so that I could actually have a place to thread some bolts through, I tossed in a few more threaded inserts, and I was able to connect this entire thing together. Ooh, that looks awesome. That is tight. Turn over. I gotta get in there. Where's the hole? I can't find the hole. Oh, there we go. Screw the hole. Yeah. So with the first three tiers all connected together now, the next thing to do is see how my hat turned out. There it is. It's done. No big gouge. Beautiful. Okay, so the new hat is done. It is off the CNC and I couldn't be happier. And this one is gonna get cut up. So what we're gonna do is this one's gonna get cut up and this one is going to turn into the orb with these. So I'm gonna try and salvage as much as I can of this. Well, there it is. That'll work. So with the orb all screwed onto the hat, the last thing to do is figure out how to get the hat attached to the cube. So since I've had so much luck so far with this dowel pin idea, I decided to do the same thing, except I wanted to make one big change, and I wasn't gonna bolt the cube directly to the hat, and that's because I didn't really know where to hide the bolts. Like, I'm pretty confident that it'll hold, but I just want to make sure. So I bought these. It's not drugs. Magnets. Ugh. So, they're very strong. They're very... strong. So, we're gonna throw some of these in. So I started off by mounting one magnet, and that didn't turn out to be enough magnetic attraction. So I ended up throwing in 3 more, and that seemed to do really, really well. So with my assembly all done and ready to go, I was finally able to take a look at this thing for the first time fully assembled. It is an assembled Pagoda. Holy shit. And then it was time to do the thing that everybody loves. Sanding. So to be honest, the sanding wasn't that bad. I was able to fly through it pretty quickly with thanks to my SurfPrep sander. And before long, all of my edges were nicely rounded over. Everything was sanded and I was ready to put on some finish, which turned out to be a pretty big disaster and actually the biggest mistake that I made on this project. And now we're gonna put on our walrus oil furniture butter. I don't think you need to shake it. We're gonna make all these pieces shine. Finally time for the glory shot. The money shot? No, that comes later. So I don't want to cast too much shade onto walrus oil here because I know a lot of people really like their product. But including this pagoda, I have had 3 projects that this furniture butter has completely failed on. So since I'm the common denominator here, maybe it's a me problem. Maybe my expectations of a finish are just a little too high and a little higher than walrus oil can deliver. And I'll show you what I mean. Because after I had finished applying and wiping off and buffing and assembling this pagoda, after I had it delivered to the customer, who thankfully is one of my close friends, I was over at his house 6 months later, and this is what the pagoda looked like. The finish had completely soaked into the wood, it was splotchy, and it looked like garbage. So much so that I ended up hauling it back home so that I could take the entire thing apart, sand the entire pagoda back down to bare wood, and finish it again, this time using Rubio Monocoat, which I have had nothing but success with, and I really should have used it in the first place. So with the Rubio Monocoat applied and the entire pagoda reassembled, this piece was finally done.